This is Mission Qualfon, a monthly podcast that takes you inside the workings of our company, but not just the ins and outs of business. We look at the ideas and insights that make Qualfon truly unique. As a company, we are committed to being the best and making each person's life better. Join us as we get to know and learn from people from across the organization. What's their story? What have they learned? And how do they live out Qualfon's mission? Welcome to Mission Qualfon.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to the Mission Qualfon podcast. Hi, Marisol. How are you?
Is it weird to do the cold opening?
It is weird. Yeah, normally Marisol does that, but I got to do it this time. That's great.
I didn't want to annoy our audience with my voice because, as you know, I'm going to tell a little story in a bit, a little story time.
Great.
So I thought we'd get you on the mic. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. And, I just wanted to say this really quick. Our podcast focuses on the mission. I mean, that's why it's called Mission Qualfon, right? But I just want to remind our listeners that we are, in fact, a very successful business. And we are doing well in our space in the market and everything. And I just want to say that because our guest today is our Chief Finance Officer. And so we'll obviously be talking about business today. Obviously, the mission will come in too. But one of the things, and you're going to talk about this, you have had an opportunity over lots of years, I won't say how many years, to work with, C-level people. Our CEO, you've worked with a long time, and you're going to kind of share kind of a cool story that goes into, obviously it's about business, it's about leadership, it's about mentorship, but you're going to kind of share a cool story about that before we talk to our guest today. So I just wanted to say that we are, in fact, a very successful business.
A very, very successful business. I did have a story that I've been thinking about for a while, but it's a long time ago, I'll date myself. It's a long time ago. And I was a young manager. I don't really remember what my title was, but it was the second company I had worked for Mike Morrow, our CEO. And at that time, I think he was a COO. And I should also date, because I know that we have a lot of millennials that listen to the podcast. This is a time before Google. Technology, it's before smartphones. It's before I make a joke in an earlier podcast, it's before a department known as workforce management. It's where you were solving for X on a whiteboard with a marker. God, I sound old. But it was a long time ago. And I was very young. It's one of those moments I remember so clearly. Mike might maybe remember it, but it was one of those moments that kind of changed the course of my career. We were at McDonald's and having a very quick lunch because we had to go back because the world was on fire. I don't remember, but it was a quick meal, and I don't remember what led up to this comment, but I made the comment to him that I couldn't pursue this other role, this other leadership role, because I was not good at math and I hated finances. And if you've worked with Mike Morrow in person, you know this gesture. There's this gesture where he put down the hamburger, and then he did this gesture where he leans back, he crosses his arms, and he gives you this look. And the look is just like, you just said something that he's just like, you could see his brain like computing it. He has a thousand different thoughts coming out. And there's a long pause, and then he starts just peppering me with questions about my educational background, math, and we just had this conversation, and he basically starts to tell me all the ways I use math during my job, what I was doing at the time,
right,
and how well I was doing, and how this concept that I had about math about myself basically was, the self-limiting belief that I had about myself that wasn't true, it wasn't the data around my job prove that that wasn't true. It might be I didn't like math, but it didn't mean I wasn't good at math, and then I couldn't do whatever the next role was in my career. And also, that's around the time that Excel, I became like a huge fan of Excel. I could, become a spokesperson for how much I love Excel, because Excel took out me having to do the math and just giving me the data. And Jeremy, anytime I'm working on something, you'll see an Excel spreadsheet. That's how I create things. He also helped me with, around that time at this particular company, he realized that I needed to be taught about finances, and he was very patient with me. I would have anxiety. Like, I never thought that I could go and present finances. I couldn't envision that for myself. And that year at that company, he was very patient with me, and he taught me that. And fast forward, I think 4 other companies after that, I would have to go report my financials, my P&L daily in person to him for multiple sites, multiple variables. And I would never, ever have had that career if he hadn't learned that about me, learned about my, I almost say fear over math and finance. And so that's a story, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward, I'm working at Qualfon. I'm meeting Jim. It's one of our first conversations. And I tell him the story. I was telling him the story, and I was telling him how much I appreciated it. And, just kind of have patience. If you ever notice someone who's having anxiety, have patience with them over the subject. And that was, I think, maybe 5 years ago, close to 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward to this year, we had a new site director, and she shares with me that Jim, picked up the phone, called her after her new promotion, and sort of had the same story, that he took his time with her and she was very appreciative. And it's just seemed like a full circle story of mentorship and leadership. And she writes this lovely note saying how patient and how everyone was with her. And this was something that she was also had anxiety, a subject that she had anxiety over. And to me, that was just such a beautiful story of like understanding how to lead, how to help, how to create stronger leaders within the organization. And so that's my story.
And that's an awesome story. And thank you for sharing that. And Marisol, I don't know if you even know this, but I know who that person is that you're referring to. And I have been on calls with her, and she is super sharp. But here's an individual who, from externally, when you meet this person, when you're on a meeting, this is a very sharp person. And yet it's interesting that she, like you, had this, and I'll use the word fear, trepidation, whatever, this feeling. You both had this feeling.
I would say for me it's trauma, but
trauma, yeah.
Whatever.
You both felt like you had this inadequacy, which on the outside looking in, no one sees that inadequacy, and no one would think, oh, Marisol really struggles with math. That's just not something that anyone else would see. But both of you had this feeling about yourself, and both of you had a similar experience in that, through the mentors around you, through the leaders around you, you realize that, yes, in fact, we are good enough. We don't have this glaring inadequacy that we think we have. And I just think that's a great story. And when we have this person on as a guest, she can probably share a little more about that. I think that'd be awesome.
I would love to have her on the podcast. And to your point, I just think we are a successful business. We have this incredible mission. We talk about education on this podcast. Like, Jeremy, if you would have told me that I was going to have a CFO on a podcast and I was going to be excited about it, you can't make this up. You can't make it up. And it's, I'm just really grateful to work for Qualfon, to be able, I do feel like I'm pursuing my total vocation. I said that yesterday to Mike. I was, working on something that was just bringing me, I was just lit up by doing it. I was very excited, and I was excited about doing this podcast. And I was like, man, today, I could speak for today. I'm working, I'm living my total vocation. And that's what we want for everyone. I mean, we truly, truly want it for everyone. And everyone has their own story and their own fears and their own limiting beliefs. And Qualfon really is a place where you can come and try to work through those.
Yeah.
They provide every opportunity and educational opportunity to do that.
Well, thanks for sharing that story. That's a great place to transition to our guest. So our guest today is our Chief Financial Officer, Jim Guillaumin. And Jim, we are super excited to have you on the podcast today. And I want to start with this question. This is kind of the question we start everyone with. But just give us a thumbnail sketch. Give us a little bit about your background that got you where you are now as the Chief Financial Officer for a corporation. So tell us just a bit about your history.
So that's interesting, and I hate to go too far back, but I'll tell the story anyways. I started my college, and I wanted to become a doctor. And so I was majoring in biology, and I enjoyed college a little too much, and I came home from being away from school, and my cousin hired me in working on accounts receivable collections at a large meat packer at the time. And I enjoyed it, and I moved into some different roles, more pure financial accounting, and I restarted my education and changed my major to accounting and graduated with my degree in accounting 12 years later. So I actually kept going with it. I kept advancing in my career, but certainly a very important thing, having that degree wrapped up that I didn't actually receive until I was in my early 30s. So I was a chief financial officer at the time, believe it or not, and then found my way to Dialogue Direct. That was a company that was acquired by Qualfon back in December of 2017, and went through that whole process with Qualfon and heard a lot about the mission and decided to stay. I wanted to see Dialogue Direct be, successful for Qualfon and for Dialogue Direct's employees. And not too long after that acquisition, I was asked to take over the global CFO role for Qualfon, which I've held since May of 2018.
So I want to follow up with the question. This is not on our list, Marisol, but this is intriguing to me. I'm like you, Jim. I didn't finish my degree until I think I was 33. And as I look back, I wouldn't do it differently. And you were in the same boat. You were already a CFO, it sounds like, when you finished your degree. I just want to ask you about that education, not necessarily the college education, but the education you received over that 13-year period until you actually finished your degree, because obviously you were already a CFO. Do we call that the School of Hard Knocks? I don't know what we call that.
So I certainly had good mentors along the way, which was very important, was very important for me. It's certainly accounting and finance, numbers is something that comes pretty natural to me. And it was very interesting. And certainly I was busy in those roles, working a lot of hours, and I could only take, a class here or there, and I'd start a class, and then something work-wise would make me have to drop the class halfway through because I just couldn't make it. And it took a long time, but it really helped me put everything in perspective. There's no question about it. And ultimately, as I was getting married and starting to think about having a family and knowing how important that education is, I didn't want to be in a situation where my children were, hey, Dad, why do I need to go to college?
Right.
You've been successful and you never completed yours.
Right.
So it was important, and certainly to continue to advance in larger corporations, et cetera. It was important for that as well. But it was more the family, and that drove me to wrap that up.
That is a really interesting story, and a common story. It's a very common story. I think I tell my kids now that are in college that this is a blessing for them. That many take, including myself, along winding, pivoting road. So that's an interesting story. So I have a question. So I came on board around the time of the acquisition. So, and I think I described this in one of the other podcasts that before I really believed in the mission or had heard Alfonso speak, I had come to the company, and just in the phrasing, you could hear kind of what my mentality was, but I just popped popcorn and watched, because I've seen acquisitions in this space for many, many times over. And so it was really interesting to see how it was all coming together. And so these are the two questions that I really have for you. You mentioned mentorship. So question number one, I wondered how working for Mike Morrow, he has very strong philosophical ideas about many things, about how to run a business. So I wondered what that was like. And then I wanted to talk about the mission. Like, as a CFO of a US-based company, Jeremy and I have discussed this several times, the way we're culturally brought up, it's a separation of church and state. Like, we don't discuss spirituality. We don't discuss those things. And so when you met Alfonso, or when you realize this, you hear these words, consecration, like, what was your first, the little cloud in your head?
Certainly, going through that acquisition process, going through that diligence process, meeting with the team leading the acquisition, and meeting Alfonso Sr., and it's just words. I make this same statement all the time when I'm interviewing someone, as I talk about how truly the mission is so important to Qualfon and is truly part of who we are. When I heard that at the time, it was just words. And okay, I can think of, all right, maybe if it helps reduce attrition, there's a financial benefit to it, but it was just words. And it wasn't until I attended the first summit, Qualfon Summit, at the beginning of 2018, and spent those few days with that team of mission leaders, and so specifically remember the Shining Star Award ceremony. And as those winners were announced, and as they'd walk up to the stage, the emotion, the tears in the eyes of the people in the audience who were so incredibly happy for that team member that got that or received that recognition, that the audience was crying. And it was, whoa, this is so real, and how we can have a company with 15,000 employees and still have it be such a family. And that starts with Alfonso and Mike, certainly, and it is the lifeblood of the organization, and it drives everything that we do and everything that I do. And it was at that point that I thought to myself, if they'll have me, Qualfon is somewhere that I can retire from, truly.
That's a very similar experience, I think, for a lot of people. So when the acquisition took place, I thought it was a really interesting time in the company's history, because it was sort of like a major moment of growth. And, there's always, I experienced growing pains at those moments. But I will have to say, it felt to me, outside looking in, that it was I just felt it was the word that, comes to mind is classy. It was just a very easy acquisition and merger. It didn't seem to carry a lot of the anxiety and stress that I've experienced in the past, and I just wondered what your view of that was like.
So there's always a little bit of anxiety and stress. There's no question about that. It's a monumental situation for both the acquirer and the acquiree. And it takes a little while, but one of the biggest things and one of the most important things was, maybe it was because of our size, where, really, well, we were certainly acquired, no question about it. It was kind of a merger of equals, if you will, from the size of the businesses. And we were pretty much left alone, so that the rest of Qualfon could really understand more and more and more about the Dialogue Direct business, this new marketing services piece, which was not part of the legacy business prior to the acquisition. And I think that helped everybody. It helped us really understand and learn more about the whole dynamics of Qualfon and the mission, and really where the importance is there. And it helped Qualfon really understand more and more about the people and the culture and the business of Dialogue Direct. And it really made that ultimate integration far, far smoother. And it's really the right way to do it. And I think that was a big part of where we are today and the way we approach acquisitions.
So I have a question about being a CFO, being at the proverbial table. How seriously do you take your role as a chief officer and the mission? How does that combine? Because I can see it working in the peripheral. I see how all of you live the mission through your work. But from your perspective, how has the mission affected your leadership style?
I would say, look, being a chief anything has a level of responsibility and accountability that is significant, regardless of the company. With Qualfon and our mission, I take it, and I believe pretty much everybody on the E-team would feel similar. But for me specifically, I take it that much more seriously. It is that much more of a responsibility, in that our mission is ongoing. We are building a company to better the lives of as many persons in perpetuity. So it's that much more important to be making the right long-term decisions for the sustainability of Qualfon, and certainly the continued financial viability, as we are bettering the lives of persons around the world through employment and all of the other benefits and services and training and mentoring, etc., that we offer people, and that goes on forever. To me, it's that much more responsibility in the role.
From the outside looking at it, it looks like it's just a filter that's been added to all of you. Like it's not something you can put on the side and look at, every quarter. It's like, it's just every decision is filtered through this mission in a way. I've never seen that. I've always seen profitability being the main filter of any organization I've worked for. So this has been just an incredibly different experience.
It is very different, especially versus kind of my background, oftentimes with pure financial owners of companies. So look, we are all about the mission, no question about it. But the financial results, the profitability finances the mission. So the mission isn't for improving financial performance. It's quite the opposite. The financials are just financing the mission.
So Jim, we kind of talked about it a little earlier, but I want to circle back a bit. Now, you through the acquisition came to know our CEO, Mike Morrow, and now you work with him on a regular basis. Now, I'm wondering what your thoughts are in terms of kind of his philosophy about finances, about the mission. What have you learned working with Mike in the time that you've been here?
First and foremost, Mike is the consummate mission leader. It drives everything he does and says. The mission is integral to everything. So I know that kind of goes without saying, but it really truly is the case. Employees come first, the mission comes first, even to the someone might use this term, to the negative impact of the bottom line. It is what it is. That is consistent with our mission and what we're trying to do. And it doesn't always mean what is the most profitable approach to something. It's what's consistent with our mission. And that's really the way I operate as well. Certainly, Mike he likes to get into the detail. Mm-hmm. And whether it's from prudent decisions on spending or just decisions that you might typically, or in a company our size, you might typically not see the CEO getting to that level of detail. But I find that it is less about that specific decision than it is making sure that people are always thinking about prudent spending and prudent decision making. And it isn't just with the big decisions. It's all the decisions. So I feel that it's just to continually drive that culture, which ultimately, has or drives significant value for Qualfon. And there's one thing, and I say this occasionally. Mike and I feel have a very good relationship. I have very much enjoyed working for him and with him, and I am oftentimes surprised by his means to an end. So we might have the same view on the end or ultimately where we want to go, but his path to getting there isn't necessarily the course I may have gone to get there. But lo and behold, in the end, we get to that same end, and I sit back and kind of shake my head and I learned something. So I do find that oftentimes being the case.
Welcome to my 30-year career. Yes, he has his brain is a very interesting tool. I think that was one of the biggest things I've learned from him is there's more than two solutions to any problem. There's infinite solutions. So just keep looking, keep working the problem to figure out a solution, which is something I've been able to use in my life. So he's a great mentor. Okay, so Jim, again, from working from the peripheral with the E-team, something that, maybe people don't understand is that you have to kind of work on a couple different timelines. And, you have to work with the information from the past, what has happened, present day, what is happening, and planning for the future success. And that's something that I don't think people really recognize about your position. How do you balance that? How do you balance all the things that are happening today? I can guarantee that, you have 100 different items that you need to get through today. You have to look at what's happened last month, and you're looking at, the strategic plan for the next few years. How do you manage that?
Well, fortunately, I have a wonderful team. It's by far not just me. It's a team of people, some with responsibilities more related to the current or historical, the accounting group that's booking the transactions on a regular basis and doing comparisons and understanding versus the past, and then a team that's helping manage the go forward. And it's not easy, but all that data has a lot of insight, a lot of things that you learn from, and it is a tremendous amount of work. But again, when our requirement here, or what we're all striving to do, is to build a company that continues to grow and has an infinite life, it's very different. What I do enjoy is making or looking at the longer term impact of decisions. Not everything is very short term, and how does it impact this year, or in my past when I worked for financial owners, if there was an exit planned and in the future, how does it impact that exit? This is all about long-term sustainability. And fortunately, our chairman, our founder, Alfonso, has taken a very conservative view, and we're very conservative and prudent in our growth and in our spending. But it's a very different phenomenon, and one that I very, very much appreciate being a part of.
So we have a monthly leadership training series that we call our QMLs. It's for Qualfon Mission Leader. Marisol, Jim did one of our QMLs. Gosh, it's been probably over a year ago, Jim. And it was so instructive that we actually wound up taking part of that QML session and putting it into our supervisor certification training, because it was just, the way he explained it was just very relevant, I think, to the audience of that training, which are brand new supervisors. And Jim, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but in that training, you used an analogy where you have like a bucket full of water, and you use that. And it was just a very powerful analogy to really help agent level and new supervisor level understand the impact of their actions on our financials. And so I wonder if you could talk for just a minute, Jim, about, what would you want a new employee, someone who thinks that they really, they're so far removed from the decisions that are made at your level. They probably think that. But what would you say to those line level employees about their impact that they have on the financial success of a company?
Interesting question. And certainly everything everybody does on a daily basis has the potential of impacting the overall financials of the company. Certainly small profitability responsibilities that virtually everybody Qualfon wide has on a daily basis. But most importantly, or most critical, is how we service our clients. Being there, treating our clients the right way, as people have been trained, with the utmost respect. That is certainly where people can have the biggest impact, in that the more our mission is evident in the way our employees interact with our clients and our clients' clients, the more the strength and power of Qualfon and the happiness of our clients and their willingness to continue to grow with Qualfon comes through. And everything they do every day, there's something that impacts the financials, but the most important piece is managing our clients and our clients' clients the way that people have been trained.
So Jeremy, you know how I mentioned I think it was in the last podcast, how Jim may or may not be one of my favorite ET members. Not that I'm supposed to have favorites, but the fact is, for me, what I look for in leadership is I like a variety of leadership styles. I'm not necessarily a fan of just the one bold leadership style. And what Jim has, and he's not going to say this for himself, I don't think, but he is a listener. He will listen to, and I'm speaking for myself as an employee, to an employee's I'm trying to think of what the right word is. The image that comes to my head is, my hair is on fire, but I don't think that's the image I want to use. But things that are I'm really, really important to me. And even though he's in finance, even though I have nothing to do with finance, he is
That's
one
not
of
true. Everybody has stuff to do with finance.
Okay. Even though I'm not in the finance department, he's probably one of 3 of the chief level officers that I will go to when I have something that I really want the leadership team to think about and consider. And I have to say, he honestly, genuinely does it. There have been, and Jim can attest to this, like 1-hour conversations at like 7:00 at night where I'm pacing and very passionate about a conversation, and Jim's on the other end of it. And it's not that he's just letting me talk. I have seen him then take action on the things that I've spoken to him about. And to me, that's huge. That's a big differentiator in leadership.
And Marisol, certainly I appreciate that you care about these things. Oh my gosh. And that you want to take the time to articulate what's causing you angst. And certainly, for instance, with diversity in the workplace or inclusion, or I certainly am not a huge LinkedIn user. I don't post all that much unless it's something that's very important to me or to Qualfon. And recently, with National Women's Day, there was a post. It wasn't something that was drafted or written for me to post, certainly something that I posted about the Shining Star Award and something I mentioned earlier is part of when I really felt Qualfon's mission, and the reality that here with the 2022 Shining Star Awards, that the majority of the recipients were women, and that was factual. I remember during the ceremony that clicking in my mind and thinking that this is something at an opportune time. We need to make sure that we get this message out. And it's something that does resonate with me and with the leadership team, and I took that opportunity to make that post.
Yes, and I appreciate that. This is a funny story. I don't know if he'll make it in, but Jim has referred to my emails as Molotov cocktails, which I think might be one of my favorite compliments I've ever received in my life. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Jim, for coming on the podcast and sharing. I know you have so much more to offer than finance. I'm sorry if I make finance sound boring. I know I'm totally editorializing my own feelings about math into that. But I do appreciate you coming on and sharing your stories with us.
Well, thank you, Jeremy, Marisol, and Qualfon. Thank you for the opportunity for letting me come on the podcast and for being part of Qualfon and having this responsibility to help lead the financial charge of our mission long term. It's an honor.
Jeremy, who would have thought we would have fun with a finance guy? No,
that was great.
It was really great. And I thought it was inspiring. I thought his story was super interesting, and I was glad to be able to highlight him. I don't think it's something that he would do for himself.
Right. And I mentioned it in the interview, but I just want to kind of reiterate his story about how here he was already working as a CFO when he finally finished his degree. I can relate to that because I was 33 when I finally finished my degree. And we even mentioned it, but I think it bears repeating. The Rochat School of Business, which we've mentioned a couple times on the podcast, is an opportunity for folks like Jim, like me, like I'm sure hundreds of people in our organization that just started working, right? They had started working and having families, and that opportunity to finish that degree that they probably always wanted to do, it never really came. Well, with Rochat, lots of folks in our organization are doing just that right now. They're finishing bachelor's degrees or even master's degrees while they work through this great program. And so that's just another example of how we're helping folks pursue their total vocation, including higher education. And that's just great.
Like I said, multifaceted.
Yes.
Well, I'm grateful for everyone who tuned into the podcast. I'm thankful to our listeners, our subscribers. If you could rate and review, it would be wonderful. We'd love to get this message out there to as many people as possible. We'd love to help any potential clients work with us because we are a wonderful organization.
Yes, we are.
So check us out at qualfon.com.
Bye, Marisol.
Bye, Jeremy.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Mission Qualfon. Remember, you can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. Please subscribe, and we'll see you next time on Mission Qualfon.